Um, when you're solving a problem, what's more important to you, the journey or the destination? What's more gratifying? When you attain a goal or solve a problem, when you've figuring out how to solve it, or attaining the outcome once you do.
I'd say the outcome.
Okay. What's more important as an absolute value to you? Is it the truth or getting what you want?
I'd say the truth.
How about what makes you more angry at yourself when you said you were gonna bring home a loaf of bread. You were gonna bring a loaf of bread on your way home. You're gonna stop and get one on your way home, but then you forgot about it and failed to do so. Or you've made some claims and somebody catches you being illogical.
I would guess the claim of being illogical, but I don't know. The other one would bother me as well, though.
Okay.
Because that I was going to do it, and I prefer to do it.
Okay. What would make you more irritated with a friend or a wife or whatever? If she was constantly telling you when to eat and when to brush your teeth and when to go to bed, or if she was constantly like taking things out of your hands and doing them for you. Like you go to wash a dish and she's like, let me do that.
And you want me to pick one that's worse?
Which would annoy you more, yeah.
I don't know. They both seem really annoying. Yeah, I don't think I would like either of those things.
Okay. So I feel quite confident about your type. Uh, I'd like to have you look at the RAT test, which is random associations test. Mostly
Okay.
because, given that I'm highly confident about your type, I'd like to sort of check the test against you,
Mm-hmm.
because it'll help clarify some things. But let me pull it up here, and I'll put it in the remote associates test. That's what it's called. Remote associates test. Okay. So I will share this screen here. Chrome tab. This one. Share. All right. So the way this works is cottage, Swiss, cake. The answer is cheese because cottage cheese, Swiss cheese, cheesecake. So the word that's the answer can go either before or after, but it goes either before or after each of those three words. So can you do cream, skate, water?
Okay. Cream skate water.
It's ice. Usually people
Ice.
get these right
Yeah.
away or don't.
Okay.
Loser throat spot.
Sewer.
Show life row.
Yeah, I don't know that one.
Night wrist stop.
Light.
Watch.
Oh,
Duck
watch.
duck fold dollar. Bill. Rocking
Ah,
rocking wheel high.
Nah.
Chair. Do comb B? Honey. Okay.
Honey.
That's about what I expected, and is consistent with my hypothesis, sort of. So what I think you are, and it's kind of a pleasure to say this because I rarely get to say this. You are an INTJ. A lot of people want to be INTJs, come in, maybe think they're possibly INTJs, and very, very few people I type are INTJs. I use INTJ as the teaser type in a lot of titles for typing sessions. Like typing session, Lawrence equals INTJ will get more views than Lawrence equals ESTP, right?
Okay.
INTJ will get more views. INTJs, or people who think they're INTJs, like to watch videos about themselves and or chime in on how, no, he's not an INTJ, right? So it's kind of nice to be able to tell you are consistent across the board with everything that you've answered with INTJ. Now, can you tell me what you thought you were coming in?
INTJ.
Okay, so you were right.
I was like self-type. I mean, I got it on the test, but I went back and went through myself, and that was pretty much what I was getting. So now I'm at the point where I'm just bouncing off other sources to make sure I'm not like just seeing what I want to see.
No, you're an INTJ. And the thing is, one of the reasons why I probably don't type very many of INTJs is they're correct about their own type and know it. Now, the thing is, they're also, however, have as an absolute value expert intuition, which means they're open to new ideas and stuff impacting their firmness of their conclusion. And or making them decide, maybe I'll solve this by getting clarification from getting confirmation from Eric, But it's like INFJs are much more likely to be type them, not because they're less certain about their own types, but because they're concerned about the FE aspects. Like, I want Eric to type me so that I can, when I come up with these FE challenges where someone says, you're not an INFJ, I can say, well, I'm not making the claim. Eric told me I'm an INFJ. And then that relieves them some FE burden, right? So they're much more likely to have me type them than INTJs, who generally type themselves correctly. No, they're pretty confident that they're right and don't necessarily feel a need to be typed by anybody. But maybe, in this instance, you also thought I don't know if you wanted to publish or not, but if you did, then you may feel like it's useful for the community as a whole to get to see a typing of an actual INTJ. So, I don't know what you're thinking of that. I don't know why it is that you decided to get typed by me, but that's my hypothesis about why I don't type many INTJs.
Okay. I wanted to just double check, and I went to another guy, and he did come to that conclusion, but he seemed like he was kind of like, it's between this and this, and I'm like, okay, that's not definitive enough, so let me just double check this again, and then I came to you.
Well, as you can see, I was not hesitant at all.
Say you're the best in the business, so I was like, all right, well, let's see,
Well, and the other thing is this: when I tell people their type, I don't necessarily tell them with a great deal of confidence. The confidence I tell them their type is the confidence I actually have. So there are some occasionally I'll say, you're a real tough typing. I'm pretty sure you're this, but I can't completely eliminate yeah, or something like that. But with you, I don't have. You're clear as day. You're basically every single checkbox checked off, consistent with INTJ, all the way through.
Shouldn't I have done better on that last test you gave me? I would have thought that was like a NI test or something.
I see. Then, well, this is what I was confirming. What I've determined is it links much more, or it's a combination of things, but the very best people at it are actually any FE people. So Alpha Quadra is best at that. And what I used to think was a linkage to NI is actually a linkage more to just, I guess, in either N plus FE. So
Okay.
it's like the communicative aspects of FE have a lot more to do with whether or not people do well on that. So what I confirmed is that if I'm right about being wrong about the linkage between that test and NI, then NITE will display less competent than NIFE, which itself displays less competent than NETI. So it's obviously not linked very clearly to NI. And that's why I gave it to you, because I wanted to confirm exactly that you were not going to do especially well on it despite being an NI Dom.
Mm.
Because I was so confident going in before I gave you that test that you're an INTJ, that I thought, okay, this is a perfect opportunity to check my hypothesis here, because I don't have any doubt about this guy's type.
How did you, so early on, you just knew?
Well, there were a couple factors. First of all, early on, I thought you were FE because you're smooth. You know, you're not awkward at all. And this, you falsify the robotic INTJ stereotype easily, right away, immediately, which is great. I'd love to see that affect stereotype be falsified, because it's not the case at all. INTJs are like that at all. But the thing is, what I quickly enough determined was you had contempt for FE concerns in general, and you couldn't have failed the sarcasm test any more hilariously. That was not a sarcastic tone of voice. It turns
My
out
wife, she says she can't tell when I'm joking or not.
that
It baffles me.
well, INTJs can recognize when others are using sarcasm, but they can't seem to do it themselves. That's a FE polar thing.
Mm.
They can't change their tone to modulate and convey things that aren't explicitly conveyed in the words like that on demand.
Okay.
So then your TI was snappy, but not front stack, but very, very accessible, which is textbook 6 slot, you know? And you can see it's not front stack because of your critique on the hats question, where you bring in the actuality of being a prisoner in the situation, having a goal to attain and or a problem to solve, rather than dealing with it as an abstract issue foremost, and neglecting to include any reality based things, which is what NETI would do with it, you know, or TINE. And then, like, your answer to you were able to tell me what your emotion was. I'm feeling kind of nervous, more easily than you were able to even really address my emotion. Instead, you thought, well, what emotion would a person have? You kind of said, okay, well, for me, this is a new experience, so I feel emotion of nervous. Now, therefore, let me see what emotion he has. Well, for him, it's not a new experience, so he must not be nervous, which is not looking at me or observing me or taking any cues from me. It's instead using this workaround, right?
Yeah, kind of filling in the blanks.
So, also, like, your expert intuition is very 5th slot. You're able to change the thing, but you're changing it a little bit with orders of words and phrasings and stuff, not really changing the words themselves. That's another kind of 5th slot expert intuition. Everybody but any 1, 2, well, everybody but Alpha Quadra basically is bad at inky pinkies.
Mm.
So
Yeah, I felt horrible. It's just like, wow, just blank.
yeah, your TI was quite robust, which is also consistent with, as I said, six slot. You know, once when I'm asking questions, that it's easy for you to just go, all right, he's just talking about the symbolic relationship here. Like all some turtles like to be purchased. All things that like to be purchased are named Ted. It removes from you any pull to the real world, right? Whereas the hats question drags you into the real world and makes it a much more complicated question for you than it is for an INTP.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That I had a lot of difficulty with that. It just didn't. It was like trying to change the way I thought about the question itself. All right.
Yeah. So you're an INTJ, and it's a pleasure to get to type 1. The news for most self presuming INTJs is always bad. It's almost always bad. So it's like, okay, no, you're not an INTJ. You are.
Why does everyone want to be an INTJ? I mean, don't get me wrong.
They've got this mastermind thing, you know.
But there are negatives that come with that.
Yeah, I know. People don't get how sucky it is to be an intuition dom.
I don't actually mind that part. It's just more so sometimes there's a weird kind of, you feel like an alien.
Yeah, well, that's part of being an intuition
in relation
dom.
to other people. Yeah, all right, maybe that is partially.
I mean, the thing about INTJ is the quote that I've always said that most INTJs relate to is, everyone's doing everything wrong, and though I'm infuriated by it, I will reveal nothing.
I saw that. That kept me entertained for weeks. I thought that was so dead on and just hilarious. Inside, I am fuming.
Like every real INTJ I've ever typed or talked to, when I bring up that thing, they smile and they go, "Oh my God, that is so true." It's like every single one of them.
Is there a I mean, I know they have the same functions and everything like that, but is there kind of like a connection with the INTJ and the ENTJ?
Well, I mean, the INTJ sees the ENTJ as himself really applying himself. The ENTJ sees the INTJ as himself actually enjoying some of the fruits of his labor. The problem with ENTJ is there's no self there. It's just solving problems, attaining goals, getting to the next outcome, having, action kind of experiences with the SE third slot, and there's no coming home and cuddling up on the couch. There's no enjoying their food. There's no SI, and there's not even any memory. It's like they just move through life without any particular examples. Everything's objective analysis rather than a particularist experience for them.
Okay, that sounds like it would suck.
Yeah, it sucks ass. That's why they why are they so successful? Because they spend all of their time at work, and then after 6 80-hour weeks, they crash and get sick for 2 days. And they go, I don't know what happened. And then they come back and do it again. And then for fun, with their hobby, they research possible investments. Well, that's a great hobby. That's well, I mean, it's not like I don't stay fit. I'm also training for a marathon. Okay, those things are not hobbies. Those are just other kinds of work that you're doing.
Yes. You have time for a couple of questions?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
I'm not in any hurry.
So how can I improve my TE? Because the other guy told me the TE wasn't very strong.
Okay, well, the TE question I asked you, the direct TE question was, how do you smoke a cigarette in 5 steps? So you'd be surprised how difficult it is for some people to do that. To start at the beginning and at 5 steps, having gotten to the end, right? So, or even to understand what a step is. If I ask an INFJ, can you break smoking a cigarette down into 5 steps? They'll say, okay, so first I guess you need to know whether you want to have a cigarette, and I guess you'd need to know where your cigarettes are, and then you'd be like, okay, I should get one. And then, wait, how many steps am I on? Those are not steps. The things you're talking about is like you're just relating your mental process there. TE polar is like that. You know, it doesn't get the idea of breaking things into steps. Even if once they get that down, they'll get to step 5 and they'll be at light the cigarette and they go, oh, I ran out of steps. So
Okay.
what does this person think TE is the question. TE is being able to figure out the logic of systems that have their own logic. In other words, not communicative logic, but the logic of other kinds of systems. So if that includes things like structuring a work environment, or includes things like an application on a computer, or it includes things like a refrigerator.
Mm-hmm. I think he was saying that it didn't seem as visible. Like I think he saw the FI. He said the FI is like very clear, but he had a hard time seeing the TE.
Well,
And I
how did
think
he test for it?
he just kind of like you. He just asked a lot of questions, but his questions are a little different than yours.
Okay.
But I have noticed INTJs do seem to be their attitude is very different than mine. Like I guess I'm not, like you were saying, as robotic. Like I'm not as like dry and cut as they seem to be.
Well, I mean, that's
So
just affect. You know, people's affects are going to change and differ over time and stuff like that. But the thing about the TE thing, and there's another question I asked about to determine slot placement, which was which thing do you see more as an absolute value? Either, you know, truth, or solving problems, figuring out how to solve things, or gaining the outcome of them. Now, a true INTJ that's answering consistent with the expectations will answer that as they value truth most, then the outcome, and figuring out how to solve it not as much. And the reason is because your values go absolute, instrumental, absolute, instrumental. Absolute value, NI, truth. Instrumental value, TE, solving problems. So you're not going to, if you're a real INTJ, you're not going to express that as a primary absolute value, even though it's your tool function. And then absolute value, FI, getting the actual outcome you want. And then instrumental value, SE, doing things to follow through on. Your answer about being mad at yourself either way, whether you forgot to bring home bread or whether somebody caught you being illogical, but being more mad about the illogical, very also exactly consistent with INTJ, because a 6 slot countervalued is a critical parent. So you're going to get most mad at yourself when you fuck up in some way on that function's value frame. And your 4th slot is the one that you'd like to delegate, and you're also kind of scoldy with yourself about it because you know that your life would be more complete if you included more of your 4th slot function into the party. You'd be more balanced and a sort of more complete, better version of yourself. That to the extent that you have weaknesses or shortcomings, they stem from your inadequate inclusion of your 4th slot. This is your conscious understanding of it, right? So it's like your 4th slot is SE, your 6th slot is TI, your answers on the values there were absolutely consistent. So if the person who's testing you doesn't understand that 2nd slot TE is not necessarily going to play out as I love solving problems and attaining outcomes, working towards goals, and I love blah, blah, I love organizing plans of action, and it's not going to play out like that at all necessarily. I mean, it's necessarily not going to play out like that. If it is plays out like that, it's more likely to be like an ESTJ or an ENTJ.
Hmm. Okay. Hmm. Okay. So when you use your functions, are you kind of like using them only one at a time, or are they just going in and out as you do whatever it is you're doing?
Um, it it depends. So, like, I I can't extrovertedly intuit in a vacuum. So when I go to extrovertedly intuit, let's say I'm going to make up a story on the fly. I'm going to make up a story about a guy who had an easel on his wall and how every night when he was sleeping, some little elves would climb up onto the wall and paint a little bit more of a very detailed painting that they were going to complete across this thing. And every morning the man would wake up and he'd look at the painting and the changes, and over time the images in the painting started to move around. He saw a little village bustling with blah 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 blah. Okay, so all this extrovert intuition stuff is predicated on seeing something behind you, the SE thing, and then the rest of it I don't really know where it came from, but there's some sort of like SI kind of NI kind of thing going on there, like a Pinocchio's, not Pinocchio. Was it who was the guy who would make the shoes and the elves come and finish his shoes for him in the middle of the night?
I know what you're talking about, but I can't think of it.
I can't think of it either. So I don't know. I was sort of like drawing from that archetype. In that case, it was SENI that I was using to NE off of. So in other words, part of being an extroverted intuition dominant means I'm ignoring that NI part, but it's there anyway. Like I wasn't really aware of that shoe elf linkage until I said it out loud, and I was like, oh yeah, that's probably where that came from. I can articulate easily that the thing I see is the starting point of it, and then once I've latched onto this archetypal notion of little elves that come during the night and are gone by morning, then the details kind of tumble out to fill in that archetype a bit, So to say which cognitive function am I using? Well, unconsciously I was using some NI there, but unaware of it, and but you would really call it instead conscious extroverted intuition, which is conscious dominant extroverted intuition is the same thing as saying fifth slot ignoring NI. It's just from a slightly different angle, right?
Okay.
So similarly, I don't remember the exact question you asked, but
I was just asking, like, when you're using your functions,
oh right,
are intertangling, or you're just using one at a time?
right. So the thing is, you could probably do this as well with NITE and NIFI, although I'm not really sure how it would work. But let me say what I'm talking about. I could show you NETI, which is basically what you're getting here, or NEFE, which is just me making a bunch of jokes. Now, those jokes may be sometimes like jokes about TI style misunderstandings. In other words, they're informed by my operational frame of reference, but not necessarily. And the point of the jokes is purely that they resonate on NIFE grounds. So that's me using extroverted intuition and checking my extroverted intuition's legitimacy against the frames of reference of my third and fifth slot without really actively using my third and fifth slot. So the idea of using cognitive functions is kind of weird, right? Because really everybody has two cognitive functions. And all the rest of the functions are just definitional necessities implied by those two functions. And so when we talk about using something concurrently, the thing is people use cognitive functions either as an agent, a subject, or an object as a frame of reference. So it's like if you're using it as an agent, well, it's easy to explain with SE. If I'm punching you and Judy's watching, I'm the subject, you're the object, Judy's the agent. Okay? But the same is true for all the functions. They divide into these subject, agent, object thing. So it's like you've got as your dominant function an agent function, which means by nature you're an observer first. But because it's your dominant function, you can use it as well as a subject. In other words, to sort of declare elementary, my dear Watson, this is the perpetrator of the crime. Or you could use it as an object, being like, ew, this is so trite and cliched and awful. In that regard, you would be sort of aesthetically recognizing the aesthetic value of something as an agent, knowing about something else's, some object's NI, right? So, or NI status. So the thing is, when you're talking about using them concurrently, what we really mean is when you're using, because your function stack is agent, subject, it means your third one, which is FI, you're going to use mostly as only as an object, pretty much. So in other words, you like to experience FI feelings that are good feelings. You like to do nice things for people that the few people that matter to you, and you don't want to have to be nice to anybody else. And that's basically third slot selfish object only FI. What I mean by object only is you will sometimes be nice to other people. That's being kind of like a subject with FI, or do maybe harm prevention. That's just being a subject with FI. But by and large, FI exists in your mind so that you can enjoy the good feelings of being with, doing the things, having the thing, watching the thing that you really like or love a lot. You're precious. FI is you being Gollum with your ring and going, oh, my precious. Oh, yeah. You're so juicy.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate.
Yeah, so it's not so much that we use functions concurrently as because we're attending a certain way with this thing, it defines how the frames of reference of this other thing interact with us attentionally.
Okay. So what are your thoughts on the whole? I've heard it expressed as like masculine and feminine.
Bullshit. It's all bullshit. Completely nonsense.
Completely nonsense. Okay.
There are no masculine or feminine functions or expressions of functions.
Okay.
And nobody's been able to give me any operational definition that would allow me to test the coherency of this notion, let alone actually presented ideas, the coherency of which has validated. So there's nothing to it as far as I can tell.
Okay. So would you just be better at your first function and then getting gradually worse as you go down?
Well, it's not so much better, but that you're more fluid in the three framings. So it's like you're most fluid in your framings with your dominant. In the second function, you're much less likely to use it as like for me, I'm much less likely to use it as an agent because it's my tool function. TI, my tool function, means I'm likely to parse out other people's shit like a subject. I'm likely to say, okay, go ahead and parse me out too. I know I have to be parsed out too, like an object. But I'm unlikely to make actual decisions in my life based on TI considerations. So I don't care if Rachel wants meow and gives me an illogical argument as to why she wants it. I don't care what her reasoning is. If she wants it, it's good enough. If It's like if I don't feel like I need to justify anything in my own life according to logic. I just need to justify my claims that I'm making when I'm speaking as a subject.
Okay. Interesting.
So yeah, and then like your 6 slot function is like a subject function you only use when other people demand it of you. And your 8 slot function is like a subject function, more or less, that happens automatically when you have to have it for your dominant function to go. For me, it's SENE. So when I have to do a bunch of follow through on little steps in order to start to make a video go onto YouTube, I do those things. But I do very little more than the minimum. It's taken me a long time to even consistently make thumbnails rather than just go with the default YouTube thumbnail.
Okay. So is there a way to intentionally get better at your functions?
No.
Okay.
The thing is this: what will naturally happen is that your 3rd slot function will run afoul of your 2nd slot function less often as you get older, as you integrate the 2 competing value frames with either self-understanding or something else, And then your 4th slot function will, the scale of the problems that it causes you will get smaller as you get older.
Okay.
So those are your 2 main areas of improvement. You can also improve your relationship with your polar function simply by if you're in a circumstance where your polar never bites you in the ass, then you can successfully become friends with it, kind of, but you're never gonna really understand it or be able to attendify it meaningfully.
And that would be polar FE, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't care.
Yeah, you don't seem burdened by your polar.
It bites me in the ass from time to time, but I just feel like it's so irrational when it happens. I'm just like, all right, screw you,
What? But Lawrence, you needed to show him more respect than that.
No, you're right or you're wrong, and it is what it is. Like Ben Shapiro has a statement that I love. He says facts don't care about your feelings. I agree. I mean, I understand you feel how you feel, but it is what it is.
Yeah, it's true. Facts don't care about your feelings, but I do. That's what he should have said. That would have been much more FE friendly.
So I watched the videos between you and Rational Typology, and I would have loved to actually seen the discussion on the whole is TI logic thing. I was just wondering, is it possible, like maybe to get a mediator and we can, if you guys would actually be interested in doing that again, or is that just off the table?
Well, I mean, unless they unshared it with me, I should still have access to that original video that we made.
Mm-hmm.
And I could just upload it to the channel. It's 30 minutes long, and it's 30 minutes of me going from irrationally hopeful to fatalistically resigned to inability to communicate.
Yeah, I saw their version, which kind of, they had edited in what they had thought about certain things, and but I was just like, man, I wish there was a third party there, because it almost seemed like there was just a miscommunication. I don't know if it was just the TE and the TI, but it was like,
Well, I'm not sure the dude understood what his wife had set up, frankly, because what his wife had done is set up a conversation about my claim that they were wrong about TI. That it had been reported to me that they had said that TI was not logical parsing, because if it were, then only alpha and beta quadrotypes would be able to parse logically.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, just because something's on your backstack, it doesn't mean you are unable to demonstrate it. In fact, if it's in the 6th slot, you're probably able to demonstrate it quite well, as you demonstrated with TI. It's 6 slot backstack, but it's still very testable and tests very well. So the thing is, that's defined by where your TE is. In other words, because you have TE as a tool function, you're an expert at operationally determining the logic of systems that have their own logic. Well, language has its own logic. It's just the universal logic, because everybody uses language. So that means you're also actually quite good at figuring out the logic of that system too. Even though it's not conscious, when called upon by the world, you're going to be able to demonstrate it no problem. And so that understanding of theirs is way off base. Just because somebody's got something in the back stack doesn't mean they're unable to demonstrate it. And the point is, though, we couldn't get into that conversation at all, because when I said, all right, so my understanding is this is your position on introverted thinking, and I got a lot of mush. Well, is it your position? I got a lot of mush. Okay, well, what is your position then? I got a lot of mush.
Yeah, he can sometimes get very out there as far as the concepts. I did notice that with him. Yeah, I would have loved to actually hear the discussion.
It wasn't a discussion. That's the thing. It was like this frustrating battle of me trying to find some point where we could agree and work off of, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's agreeing that this is his position. or that this is mine and he disagrees with it. Even if it were that, but I couldn't even get to that, So it's like, if you're denying the capacity to make progress by denying either party the ability to pin the other one down,
right,
then there's never going to be any discussion or conversation or progress,
Yeah, you have to find common ground before you can even get into the discussion. Yeah, I see what you're saying. So, are you still under the opinion that you do not believe he's an INTJ?
I actually don't have any formal opinion on that.
Okay.
I mean, he might be. He's. I would expect better. It's like, when I asked him, well, okay, so how do you falsify your system? I finally got that question. He says, well, I'm not sure it is falsifiable. I was just like, okay, that's it. I'm done. Because it's like, why are you calling yourself rational typology if you're not sure if the thing you're talking about is even falsifiable?
Okay, so when I watched that, I did notice that, and I think there's like there's a certain point where I don't know if it's a TE thing, but your brain kind of switches tracks, because I've been in that like kind of discussion, and it's just like, all right, I'm getting so far into the abstract that I'm like, oh, okay, well, I don't know if you can really define this according to reality. And it's like, I've gotten so far away from the actual discussion. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, because NI presents these holistic understandings that resonate as extremely true universally to the person who's attending via NI in the dominant slot. And that can cause arguments that can be very frustrating for both parties. It's quite possible this Hamza guy is actually an INTJ, like he says he is. I argued with him in the live stream for quite a while tonight. He keeps trying to insist that this contingency argument as basically a proof for God is a good, strong argument. His definition of contingent being is that which necessarily is as it is, it could not have been, and it could not have been different than it is. And his example of a contingent being is like a mathematical theorem. So I said, okay, well, define contingent exactly. And, he won't provide a definition of contingent. He says mathematical formulas have always existed, they just needed to be discovered. But of course, that's not true. They didn't always exist. Until somebody says them, they don't exist. Yeah. And I keep trying to pin him down on what he means, right? But he keeps sort of gesturing at this holistic understanding of things that because pi r squared is the correct way to calculate the circumference or surface area of, I'm not sure which, a circle, that therefore that relationship exists independently of anybody stating it or making it, and it's non-contingent in that regard. But it's just it's like that's not any more non-contingent than anything else, because contingency is a relationship that you establish with words, like that mathematical theorem is contingent upon our observations of circles. That our observations of circles are contingent upon our capacity to observe. Our capacity to observe is contingent upon our existence. I mean, you can frame anything in terms of contingencies, right? Right. So it's a category error for him to try to say that there are non-contingent things, that because it's pretending as though the contingency were a quality like reflectiveness. Some things are more reflective than others of light, right? And that quality seems to be implicit to the thing. But contingency is not one of those kind of qualities. Contingency is something that we describe in order to establish relationships between two objects of analysis.
It kind of sounds like he hasn't really thought his theory all the way through. Because it seems like he should come to the same conclusion as you. He just hasn't fully flushed the whole thing out yet.
Well, I think he groks or intuits that mathematics and physics and stuff, the descriptive power of those things is discovered. Like, in other words, we had to discover the right formula for acceleration of an object falling on Earth, right? We had to work it out and test it and figure out, okay, this is the exact right formula, and test it multiple times, and it plays out, and blah, 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 okay? Mm-hmm. So in that regard, nobody created that formula because it couldn't have been correct without being what it is, right? But right. That doesn't make it non-contingent. It just makes it means that it's that kind of thing. If you're doing something that you can constantly and repeatedly do the same empirical tests on and check your formulas for consistency with those empirics, that's one kind of thing, right? But not all kinds of things are like that. It's like E equals mc squared. His position is, well, that's always existed. It just was just finally discovered by Einstein. But, that's factually untrue, right? It didn't exist prior to him publishing that work.
I mean, if you said that, that's almost like everything exists and then we're just creating it, but these things are already existed. We're just defining them almost.
Right. Well, he would say like this lighter is the other kind of thing, that it's something that didn't have to be this way. The manufacturer could have manufactured it a different way, and it wouldn't be more wrong, right?
Right.
And that's true, but it's not informative of anything. And this idea that there are contingent and non-contingent beings, by which he just means objects of analysis, is is like, okay, well, tautological stuff isn't contingent. Like A equals A is always necessarily true, but A equals A is itself contingent upon somebody saying A equals A. And he says, okay, well, assuming, okay, let's go ahead and provided that consciousness exists and there are observers, now let's talk about things that are non-contingent beneath that contingency. I mean,
Yeah.
it's nuts, but it's like that's the kind of so I don't know if that guy's an INTJ or not. He might be, or he may just be one of the 90% of INTJs who's not an INTJ.
Yeah. Yeah. Um. Oh, there was something I wanted to ask you about TE. And I could be totally off on this, but this is a theory I'm just thinking about. It seems like TE wants to make things work in a system that's better for everyone. Although
That's
that doesn't
NITE, the everyone
that's
part.
NITE. Okay. Because I'm like, that shouldn't I don't think it should define what is better for everyone, which is to me like a value judgment. But at the same time, I feel like that's kind of what it's doing. Like sometimes, not in everything, but like I'll be at work and I'll see something that's just incorrect and have the urge to fix it. Therefore, it functions better for everybody at work. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it's because you want to you want it to be addressed on as cascading down from a universalist understanding. In other words, you're treating it first and foremost as an object outside of your experience that you intuitively know about. If you were SITE, you would treat it first as something that you get to know via experience.
Okay.
And so when your solution then would be much more emergent from your own experiential processes if you were SITE, because you wouldn't start with a frame of reference that the thing you're dealing with is an identity outside of yourself that has all the information you need about it within itself.
Okay.
So like my dad, ESTJ, when I was younger, he used to complain and kerfuffle about idiot lights, you know. Like he thinks every car should have nothing but gauges, or you should just be able to tell by the feel what's going on with your car, you know. Some NT, so he's an STJ. Some NTJs said, I'm working for the car company, so my goal is to have a solution that's as universal as possible and that links to the bottom line, which is saleability. And I'm going to take into account the fact that most people don't want to engage in that day-to-day relationship with car maintenance. And so they'd rather just have a light come on that tells them to go to the shop. So that's a better solution than all these gauges. Even though the gauges may be better for somebody who's a car guy, most people aren't car guys.
All right. Yeah, that's a valid point. Huh. All right. Wow, I might be out of questions. Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay, cool. Well, I'll stop this recording, and I think I will probably just leave them as separate videos, and I'll upload them to either Google Drive and share it with you privately if you want, or if you already know you want me to publish, you just tell me that right now.
That's fine. Yeah, you can publish.
All right, cool. So I'll publish these for the first one for later today and part 2 for tomorrow.
Okay.
All right. Or maybe I'll publish it for later today. I don't know. I'll see, but it'll be soon. All right, thanks.